Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough, where I attempt to load balance all my factories. For some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last episode, I created 50 modular frames, 24 heavy modular frames, and 36 fused modular frames in preparation for future factories. Today, I'm going to continue that preparation work. I'll be starting a new factory in the Grassy Fields. This factory will produce all the electronics I need for the endgame. I'll be working on the bottom floor, which is going to take care of all the ingots I'm going to need, along with 9,000 Quickwire. Here we are, back in the Grassy Fields. So I'm just on top of my train station. It is going to get a little bit taller today. So I'm thinking I'm just going to use this spot just right out here in front of the train station because, well, why not? It's nice and more or less flat. It's flat enough. The nice thing with it having a little bit of elevation is I'll build that top floor to go over that, which will leave a whole bunch of space underneath for any extra logistics. And I'll probably take good advantage of that. There's the Fixmas factory out there, and we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. I am going to clean up these power towers because I swear that's not actually floating in the middle of the air. The pillar it's on just isn't loading from this far away. But I'm going to clear all those up because I just forgot to clear them up. But they're the leftovers from running power all the way out here for Fixmas. If I decide to do Fixmas next year in this world, I'll have to rerun power, but that's okay. Alright, so let me start off by laying down a whole bunch of foundations, and then we'll just kind of go from there. And now I have some foundations to work on. So this is just a rough outline. I'm probably going to change it here and there, but I just wanted to kind of lay out roughly how much space I think I'm going to need. And I put it in the description, but I am using a new mod now, and that's Manta Raise. It's just one of those things that I honestly feel that should just be in the game. Hopefully that's just going to get added, if I'm being honest. All the mod does is change the flight path of the Manta Raise so that it will fly above your factory and not run into anything, which, I don't know, just kind of makes sense to me. And that way I won't see it just fly straight through this factory because it comes pretty low in the Grassy Fields. It's the only place that I really ever feel that I need this mod. Everywhere else is fairly easy to work around and actually can be kind of fun building a path for the Manta to fly through. But in the Grassy Fields, he just takes up a good amount of usable space in my opinion, and I didn't want to deal with it, so I'm just using that mod so we don't have to watch him fly straight through my factory. Let's take a look at the map here, and unfortunately I don't have coverage out in this area because that is going to be my first step. There is some nitrogen somewhere around here, and I think there's also quartz somewhere around here, and I want to grab both of those. This is a decent enough distance where a train would make sense, honestly, but I don't really want to deal with nitrogen. Even though packaging it would be a fantastic solution and it's super efficient that way, I also just don't want to deal with the packagers. So I'm just going to create a bus. I'll be able to grab the nitrogen from over here, and then I'll just send the quartz down and send it along the same bus over to the factory. So that's going to be my first step, is I'm going to start creating a bunch of buses for the farther away pieces. Like there's some copper and iron down here that I'm going to use. I'm also going to grab this Caterium, the pure copper node that's over here I'm also going to grab. So I've got a whole bunch of kind of base logistics to do before I can even start on building the factory. Alright, well, let me get to work. And it turns out this is where the nitrogen is. And here we are. With projects like these, I often like to work backwards. So I came all the way out here, and now I'm going to run the bus going out here and then back to the factory instead of trying to run it from the factory out to here. I find it just a lot easier, especially because you basically just have a huge target to kind of aim for. At this point, I don't care exactly where it plugs into the factory, but I do want to avoid all of these obstacles. Now, the downside with working backwards is I don't have power out here yet, even though I really could have easily just drug power towers all the way out here, and I just flew out here with my jetpack. But really, it's just a choice, making things harder on myself here, but I don't really mind. These blueprints are pretty easy to run, and with the jetpack, I'll be fine. So I'm kind of avoiding the blue crater, I honestly don't actually have plans for it. I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for, but I don't want to have this bus go straight through it and then want to add a large factory in here and then either have to incorporate that into the build or reroute the pipes. So if I just avoid it, hopefully that'll just make life a little bit easier. So holding down E, I can select all the different blueprints that are in that subcategory. So I've got basically just all my different buses, either if it's just a regular pipe, a belt bus, or I've got a combo one, which is what I'm using here. So we're going to use the right turn. And the combo is just that I'm running pipes on the bottom, and then I've got the stackable for the conveyor belts on top. And so I'm just going to continue to snake on through here, and I think we'll come out a little bit, then we'll try to snake just right past that rock right there, and that should take us basically to the factory. I'll probably have to drop down because we're a little bit too high here, but once I get closer to the factory and we get past all that stuff, we'll drop it down. And then I'll add in the quartz, which is somewhere in here. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. I already ran over and put the miners on there, but that's all that's there. So still got to create the bus. It's time to harvest some nitrogen. Let's get this sucker powered on. All right. How much can we get out of this thing? 1,500. Not as much as I would have liked. Well, for now, it's definitely good enough. For the factory as a whole, I'm actually going to need more. But this is a good start. And the one tip I can give, and I probably mentioned this before, but what I like to do is align myself with the global grid. So as you can see at the very top, I'm facing west right now, right? And so if I'm facing west and I get this aligned to face straight at me, that way when I align my pipe right up above and I go to horizontal to vertical, I just need to make sure that it's aligned in the right direction. And I know everything will be nice and perfectly straight this way if this was actually on grid. And chances are it probably won't be, but you can probably get it pretty close. Thankfully, even with the pipe connected, you can do half nudges, unlike the belts. So you can get it at least fairly close if you want to get things, you know, as straight as possible. But for me, I'd much rather align it along something just really easy, so I just get it close. And that's kind of how I do things. And then I'll just go back and place the floor hole. I just find it much easier this way. So I'm going to group these together so that I'll have 2 600 pipes and 1 300 pipe. And that way I can fit those into 3 pipes, and I'll get those sent all the way over to the factory. The bus now has the pipes that run all the way through. And if you're wondering why all 3 of them are Mark II, even though I said one of them is going to be 300, that is a valid question. And the reason is I need 600 for today's project. The rest of it is going to get grouped together with another source of nitrogen. And if I need Mark II at some point, I just like to make the entire pipe Mark II. So instead of doing Mark I all the way here and then joining it and making it a Mark II after that point, I just make the whole thing Mark II. And it really just cost me a little extra plastic, and so I don't mind. So right about here is where I'm going to branch the bus off. And I'm probably, if we just snap it onto this one, where does that line up? Oh, not bad. But then it puts the middle right where those two are. So it'd be a lot easier if we could just line this up with one of these. I think that'll miss whatever those things are. I think we can head out this way. And I just need to keep running this out, and we should be able to see the quartz in just a second. I'll have to delete that thing. I did finally make some explosive rebar, and I don't know why I waited so long to make it. I forgot how much I love this thing. And there they are. So we've got one, I think that's the impure, that's the normal, and that's the pure node. All 3 of these are going to get almost completely overclocked. They'll be just shy, but I'll go over that when I'm building the machines. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll just say I'm grabbing 1200 from there, and I'm going to combine these two for roughly 900. So I'll have 2 belts that I need to send up here, and then those will merge up with that bus and head on into the factory. Well, thankfully that didn't take too long. And now I've got a radar tower because I thought it would be handy just to be able to get full view of all the different nodes around here. So it helps. So we've got the impure node, and that's just headed straight into this one. And same thing with the pure node. I just snaked that one over into here. Found another doggo. Now he's guarding this area. And hopefully our new stinky friend will leave him alone. We've just got the impure node coming down here, and then it's just merging up with the normal node. So we've got a 900 line going here, and then the full 1200 line is headed straight out of here. But like I said, these are going to be ever so slightly underclocked, but I'll go through those numbers later. And then I've just got those running along here, and then up to the bus, and then over into the main bus. Now, if I take a look at the map, a whole bunch of things are green, and I have absolutely no idea why. Well, if I close and reopen the map, it went away. Okay, less distracting this way. So if I highlight the radar towers, it'll highlight all of them, which is really handy. And of course, there's just this area that's not covered, and that is where one of the next nodes is. There's a Caterium node somewhere on this island, I think. And then I'm going to grab this one as well. So those are the next two buses I'm going to create. So I'll grab these iron nodes. I think there's also copper somewhere. It's probably just right outside of the range would be my guess. Of course. I'm trying to speed through, but also still highlight all of the buses gathering the ore because I think it's interesting. I do actually enjoy creating these. But I've created a lot of them in this playthrough already that you've watched. So let me create a few more and I'll show them off. We are here, well, basically on the edge of the map. I think that's Paradise Island? I think that's its name. So here is the waterfalls that are just right next to the grassy fields. Try not to fall into the void. And the source of a pure Caterium node. So we're just grabbing that. It's going to get bussed all by itself over till it meets up with this limestone node. I need a little bit of limestone, so I figured I might as well just grab this one. It's in a convenient spot. Don't worry about that belt that's in there. That's not actually supposed to be there. I wanted to run the belt backwards, but since you can't change the direction of the belts, I needed to lay a section first, so I just kind of threw one in there. And then I could build it going backwards. That looks better without that random belt in there. And since this is right next to the factory, it was kind of a convenient spot to grab all of those nodes and get those bussed over here. I've just got them kind of chained together, so the Caterium node goes into here. This one shares a little bit of a wall, so all of those feed into here. And then we've got all of these going into this one, and then off onto that limestone, and then we'll go into the factory. As far as purity goes, this area is awful. All of these are impure nodes, but there's so many of them, I was able to combine them and create 2 full Mark 6 belts of iron. I'm not going to bother with this impure copper node. That one's used for Fixmas. And then the Caterium node. So these should all be completely full Mark 6 belts of iron and Caterium. Then we'll grab the limestone, that Caterium, and I'll finish the bus and send them on into the factory. I'm also going to use this right here, squeeze in a few water extractors because I am going to use some refineries in this build. The next thing on the agenda will be to finish that bus, although I may put it off a little bit until I put down the water extractors just so I can make sure I miss those. So I kind of want to get one other piece started, and that's laying down some more train tracks. Right up there is my train station, and you can just barely see the aluminum factory in the red forest. Eventually I'm going to need some of that aluminum for the factory, so I'm going to need a train for that anyways. But I also want to bring down the petroleum coke. I don't need it for today, but the factory will need it. But what I need the train for today, anyways, is the fact there is some quartz right over there. Now I could definitely build a bus, but it's much closer to the train station. And if I zoom in even farther, there's actually still some space underneath the train track. So the train runs pretty close to the quartz nodes, so I'm just going to get those bussed underneath the train line, get those sent over to the train station, and then with the train line that I need anyways for the coke and the aluminum, we'll just create a couple freight cars or an extra train just for the quartz and get that sent over. So I want to work on that next, and I will meet you up at the Red Forest. Here we are in the Red Forest, where I have special disappearing and reappearing trains. I've seen that in a couple places in my world. I don't really understand, but whatever, as long as they run on time, that's really all that matters. So I need to add some more train stations. And I'm thinking, might as well just add them right up here. So this train line is the one that runs to the other side of the Red Forest grabbing bauxite. This is the one that runs all the way out to the west coast. So of course, I really didn't plan this well, and I thought that putting this train on this side just made a whole lot of sense, because I was eventually going to need some trains that are going to head out to the northern half of the map, and so having them on this side just made sense. But of course, now what I'm going to do is have these cross over to this, so I'm probably going to come out, oh, actually probably right here. We'll probably just go straight on this one, and then we'll have this train line kind of snake in. And I went and created a whole series of new blueprints for just a double line. So keeping the theme the same with using the beams as kind of like guard railing along the sides, so it all kind of matches the rest of them. But now I can just get this. It's easier if you just do it from this side. All right, get that lined up, and probably create one with tracks to make this a little bit easier on myself, but we're just going to head out this way. So I'm going to go out straight this way, and then once I get past, I think that thing, oh, that thing is actually too far. Oh, SAM ore is too far to ping. Well, once we get past that weird looking pillar with the SAM on it, I'll hang a left, and that should give me enough room to head down there. I think it actually kind of slopes down too much for me to do a spiral. I mean, I could, but I think a ramp will probably just make the most sense. So we'll just ramp on down to the Grassy Fields. It's definitely still a work in progress. As you can see, the random scaffolding, and there's probably a whole bunch of walls hanging down from when I was laying down all the ramps. So let's hop in the train and go for a quick ride. Also gives me an excuse to just ride past this thing again. Alright, so we hang a quick left and drive straight through all of these walls. Whoops. Honestly, a way shorter train ride than I thought this was going to be. So when I was up there building, you can't actually see down into the Grassy Fields because of all the fog, and I just didn't want to turn it off. And I just did not realize how short of a trip this was going to be. Even from down here, it just didn't register how short of a trip it was. But that's certainly not a bad thing. Alright, so I wanted to show closing this off. So this is often how I merge these two things. So this right now, because I turned 90 degrees, and if we line ourselves up with the foundations, and right here in the middle, and as you can see, I'm facing south. So I am aligned with the global grid, because the world grid is aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. But it's not quite on the grid. So what I had to do is, let's see, we've got turns and turns and turns, but I think, yeah. So this is like 1 meter moved out, and then I had to start the turn, and that's how I got these two to line up. But now if I take this, as you can see, actually let's do the closer one. It's really close, but it's not quite lined up. Especially with the beam, it'd be more or less hidden. But we could do a little bit better. So I've showed this before, but just in case you haven't seen it, you grab a beam, it can be either one. Go to the center of the foundation, click right here in the middle, and then go to same spot on the opposing foundation. Go ahead and click that right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just do it for both sides. Then what you want to do is grab the foundation, aim it at the beam, and it will snap directly to the middle. So now we're 4 meters off in both directions. So I need to go down 4 meters and then to the right 4 meters. From here we can place that, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And then I can just go to default, and I can just place some more foundations on either side and bring it in. And then I do the same thing on this side, and then it'll be a really smooth connection on both the front and the back. Delete our beams. And now I can just connect my ramp. And in freeform, it'll snap directly to the other one. Whereas if I have this in default, you'll notice it's ever so slightly off. Just a tiny bit, but if we switch it to freeform, we can get it snapped directly to the end. And that method works great for just building in general, whether it's roads, train lines, or just, you know, anything you want. So now I'm going to clean all that up because obviously I don't want my train to drive through a whole bunch of walls. And I'm going to add some pillars. And then I'm just going to copy this whole pattern. So I'm just going to add another floor, add some more train stations, and I'll get these trains up and running. And this way I'll have plenty of time to test the throughput. But the trip is pretty short, so I'm sure I won't have any problems. Right? Well, I finally built enough stations that now they're just numbers. No more fun names. Well, back to work. And just like that, I've got another floor. And I cleaned up my mess. Got some pillars. Now it's supported, and I feel better about it. On the loading side, things are pretty easy. I just need to add some buffers and the lifts and belts to get those things there. On this side, let's go downstairs. I'll have some lifts that bring things all the way down through the other floors. We'll just miss the other train stations, but since they're all in a line, it should be pretty easy. Last week, I put out some videos on the other playlist that went through some of my new train balancers. These are super simple blueprints where I just have the industrial storage container and the load balancing pre-done, and that way I can plop these down where I need them. And all of these are less than 2 foundations wide, which is how wide each freight platform is, so I can stack these next to each other for however many freight platforms I'm using. I just need to get the lift brought down and plugged in here. And then I'll be able to have whatever amount that I have plugged in over there load balanced automatically out on this side. So it saves me a lot of time. I honestly don't know why I didn't blueprint these sooner, so I really do appreciate all of your comments. I think now is a good time to go over this flowchart. And I apologize, I know this probably looks awful, so I'll just go over the highlights here. And like always, or at least when I remember to, the link to this will be pinned in the comments. I realize there's a lot going on, and I say this pretty much every time, but it's really not too bad, I promise. A lot of this is I'm just making extra of a whole bunch of things. Like for example, in total I'm going to be making 9,600 copper ingots. However, I actually only need 3,750 today to make the fused quickwire. I'll need some of it later on, but most of that is just going to be extra. But let's be honest, can you really have too many copper ingots at this point in the game? I needed 7,700 quickwire for what I have planned upstairs, so might as well just round up and I can get really nice even numbers if I just make 9,000 of it. There's a project or two later on that might need some quickwire too, so it'll be nice to have some extra. The part that I'm most excited about is using the new quartz purification and distilled silica alternate recipes. This is a great factory because I actually need both. Most of the time I either need pretty much all quartz or I just need all silica for what I'm doing. But in this factory, since I need both quartz and silica, I'm using this alternate recipe to make enough silica because that's the lesser of the two that I need. And then I'm going to be using the pure quartz to make up the rest of it because it is more efficient if I only need quartz. Let's get into some blueprints now. Let's start off nice and easy. Pure iron. So again, thanks to another comment, someone asking me, why don't you just overclock more things? And that is a great question, and I think I should. So this factory is going to use quite a few power shards, but it's going to save me on quite a few machines, and hopefully put a little bit less stress on my own machine. I went ahead and overclocked these to 200% so I could cut the amount of machines in half. I'm going to be using just shy of a full Mark 6 belt, so a little over 1100 ore. Normally that would be 32 refineries, but with this, now I only need 16. Let me show you real quickly how I make these. Alright, so I start with just a normal foundation. It can be whatever, it doesn't really matter because the blueprint that I'm working with is a 5x5, and now that I have the Mark III blueprint designer, I've got plenty of extra space. And I don't actually even need it here, so I'm just going to use up this space. So now what I've done is created a gap of 3 meters underneath. All I want this for is to run the power lines underneath. And now I can go into my blueprints, and these are all of the blueprints that I've made with all the load balancing already done and with no recipe set. So I can find my 4 refineries, and then I just need to find a spot where it kind of fits in here, which I think it'll fit just inside or just on top of. Oh, actually, no, I've got plenty of space. Perfect. So in this case, I like to make it so that the mergers and splitters line up on half of a foundation. Just makes the rest of the belt work cleaner later on. Alright, then we can place that there, and I don't even need this last row probably. So now, with my dismantle tool, filter, we can just delete just these ones. And then I can redo the power so it's just the way I want it. And the way I like to do that is just, see, that looks like that's the center. And then get it somewhere down here. Press H to lock it in place. And then we go up here. Then I'm going to nudge it back until I can't see this wire anymore. So one more. There we go. And then we'll place it right there. And then I'll just do basically the same. So it's going to be in the half foundation. Just need to find where the center is. And there we go. And now we can connect them all like this. And now I can make sure I have my recipe set. So we do that. We place the power shards in. And now I can just copy and paste it across all 4. Now with the recipe set, now I know the numbers. So now I can double check and make sure all of my belts and pipes are the correct speeds. So now I know that this needs to be Mark 2, not Mark 1, so I can go ahead and change it for all of these. And this is basically what I did to create all of these blueprints. So the fact that I already had the bulk of it done, I just need to kind of set all the particulars, do some last checks, make sure all the speeds are correct. It'll just save me a ton of time in the future. Alright, with that out of the way, let's go through the rest of the blueprints. In a very similar fashion, I did the Caterium, doing the pure Caterium recipe, have it just raised off so I can run the power underneath, keep things nice and clean in this factory. And with this one, I used all 3 power shard slots. Since I'm bringing in 2 pure Caterium nodes, that's 2400 Caterium ore. That would take 100 refineries running at only 100%, whereas if I overclock them to 250, I can cut that down to 40 refineries. I like that number better. And last but not least, for this kind of a setup, I did the pure quartz. So with this one, I have them overclocked to 200% just so I can cut the number in half. These quartz refineries are a little bit different. So these ones are going to be using the new quartz purification alternate recipe. So raw quartz, nitric acid. These are only going to be overclocked to 150%, and it'll make a little bit more sense when I lay it all out. But the numbers are all going to work out really nicely this way. I'm going to manually place the blenders that I need. But the way this basically is going to work out is there's going to be a blender ahead here. That'll feed the nitric acid into 2 of these refineries. And then these 2 refineries are going to group up their dissolved silica. So that's going to be 90 for each machine. And then those 2 will lead into one more blender that'll take care of the dissolved silica. With the amount of copper ore that I'm using, it would take over 300 refineries if they were all at 100%. This recipe is fantastic. It's not quite as good. You get a little bit more using the pure recipe. However, this is just so simple. Equal parts copper and ore, and you'll get basically the sum of those in copper ingots. The recipe, I think, did get nerfed a little bit with 1.0, but I think it's probably fair. So this will cut down drastically the amount of machines that I need and the power usage. So even though I'm going to have these overclocked, this is going to use just so much less power. Normally I would need 96 foundries, but with them overclocked to 200%, now I only need 48. So I have this setup, and then this mirrored version right here. So it's basically the same thing, it's just these initial inputs right here are on this side facing this way instead. So that way I'll be able to put a stack of splitters right here and I can combine these 2. Each one of these blueprints will intake 600 of each of these ores and output 1200 ingots. So if I put 2 of these next to each other, I can input 1 full Mark 6 belt of iron and the same with copper. And then I'll have 2 full Mark 6 belts as outputs. Just nice and clean and simple. Gotta love it. And the last blueprint, for machines at least, is the assemblers. So this is going to be using the fused Quickwire alternate recipe, which is just really nice being able to use both Caterium and copper ingots. If you need to make a lot of Quickwire, this is a great recipe. It'll definitely save you on Caterium, which tends to be a little bit more rare when you want to create this much. So the default amount is 90, and I mentioned before I'm making 9,000, so this would have taken 100 assemblers, but if I fully overclock these, I only need 40. So instead of stacking these ones, I'll just have them all on the ground. That way I can just see everything moving around. I think it'll be a good look. And then things are labeled with colors and the amounts. So the top one needs 75 Caterium, the bottom one needs 375 copper ingots. And these 4 assemblers will output 900 Quickwire. Alright, so I've got blueprints covered. So the next thing is going to be placing them. But I jumped the gun a little bit and I have 1 or 2 more buses to create. So we've got that one, which is grabbing the nitrogen and the quartz, or about half of it. But I still need to create the one over there that's going to grab some more copper and iron, because I don't have all that I need yet. There's some nodes underneath here, but that's not quite enough. So let me knock that out. I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll start placing machines. If we take a look at the map, we're right down here at the very bottom. So I've got these nodes right here. So I think this is 2 normal nodes that I've combined for 1200. So we've got 1 full Mark 6 belt here, just joining up with this little building right here, where I'm combining 2 more normal nodes to create another Mark 6 belt. These are just headed along this way to the main bus. I'm taking this copper node, which I think is a normal. Yep, a normal copper node. So that one is just headed on over to the other copper node that's right here, which is another normal, so that I could make, as you guessed it, another full Mark 6 belt. And then I've got 2 more normal iron nodes right here. So I've got 3,600 iron ore and 1,200 copper heading on into the factory. All right, let's finally get to placing some machines. So because I just love giant boxes, the main one is going to be this box right here. And that's going to be the part that extends up to at least 1 more floor. We'll see how many of the machines I can fit on the 2nd floor when we get there. This one right here, I want to have as just this bottom floor, and I want to create, something a little bit different for the front. So at least it'll be a box with something interesting on the front. And I'm thinking, let's put the new recipe that I haven't used right up front and center. So just for the spacing wise, I'm just going to place this. Let's see, how much space do I need? Not a lot. Just place it right here just to get the spacing right. This direction. Alright, so the next part is the big section. So this is what we're going to center it on. So we've got 30 foundations. Alright, so 15 is the middle point. As far as the spacing goes, I think I'm going to give myself 2 foundations here. So if this is the middle mark, just work with 1/2 first. We can go do the other half. Since these blueprints have the underfloor logistics, well, at least just for the power, easiest way is just to place some temporary foundations down here. Just need to get these lined up. So got them nice and level, perfect. And that's where the output's going to go. And let's see if this is even the right one. Oh, need to delete 1 more foundation. Alright, there we go. And I had it ever so slightly backwards. And so is this actually. I forgot that I knew I was going to combine these 2 blueprints. So instead of having my AB2 as a singular one, I just made it a 1 blueprint. Since I'm going to do 10, it was just easiest. Alright, so we actually want to line it up with this right here. This is the middle. Let's use the old measuring tape just to make sure. Yep, there's 15. Okay. Now I just want to get it at the right vertical spot. And now I can nudge it in place. I want the center of it to be lined up with the center of this. It was the easiest way I could signify kind of the dead center of the whole thing. I'm probably going to delete these and redo it so it's a little bit more even, because as you're going to find out, this isn't going to line up nicely. B1 goes on this side. And then A1 on this side. Alright, so there you go. So my idea of being able to line this up with the dead center was great. But then I didn't really take into consideration that now I have a missing half foundation and a quarter on both sides. So that part I don't love. So I'm just going to delete all of these and then just replace them right here so that everything's lined up a lot better. It was one of those things that seemed like a good idea, but didn't quite work out like I planned. But in general, still saves me a ton of time, so it's okay. So for this, I actually got this one backwards, and I thought this one was going to be at the end, and, well, I switched things around, so I'm just going to have to replace this one. And now we can connect these because it'll all fit on one Mark 6 belt. Since each one's outputting 112.5 and I've got 10 machines, we'll be making 1,125. Alright, and then as far as the blenders, I got the spacing with that one, but we're just going to delete this. Do want enough space right here. I want to line this output with the second input for the blender. I'll show you why in a second. This is going to leave just enough space. Perfect. Right there. And right there. And you get the picture. And apparently I need to scan more hard drives. I could re-roll, but we'll just scan more because I have plenty. And then I can actually set this recipe. So we'll come back to this in a few minutes. On this side, we're going to grab another blender. And we're going to line up the output with that one right there. And that's probably going to be plenty of space. I wish I'd place that hole a little bit farther back. And this one right here is going to make the nitric acid. Okay, so I was just wrong. I think if you pick the quartz purification, it gives you both recipes. I could be off, but anyways, I've got it now. So let's go through this. All right, so distilled silica. By default, this would intake 120. I'm going to pair up 2 of these, so each one is going to output 90. So all I need is 1 power shard, and that'll get me to that 180. Each machine is going to output 405 silica, and here is the fun part. Each machine will output 120 water, it needs 150, and some limestone. So I'll just need to do some load balancing, but that'll be easy. This pipe can feed directly into here for all of these. Nice and easy. Go ahead and color coordinate. Alright, so let's deal with the water. We're going to be outputting here, and for whatever reason the output is just that half meter off from any of the normal spots on the world grid. So nudge it by half a meter and you get that nice right angle. And now how do we deal with this? So this is how I'm going to do it. I drag out the pipe anywhere over here, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to place a pipeline junction. I want it to be right here, so because these things are weird, I'm going to set it 1 meter off. And now when I have it on the pipe, this lines up directly, but when I spin it, it's 1 meter off. So that's how I get it to be in the spot that I want. Now I can delete all of this. And we take the pipe. And we connect it right in there. And the reason being is I'm going to place a floor hole right there. And do that. I may actually need to pull this out a little bit farther depending on where the load balancing for all the limestone goes. Just because this does stick up a little bit. It does look a little funny, I realize, but it works. If you're familiar with the fluid manual that's I think on the wiki, I'll link it in the description of the video. This is essentially a modified VIP junction. The way the pipeline junctions work, when they're horizontal, everything is basically on the same level, right? But when you have them vertically, things are a little bit different. It actually will prioritize whatever the lowest input is. So if I had something plugged into the very bottom, that would get prioritized first, if I understand it correctly. And then it would be the horizontal pipes, and then the top. And so by doing it this way, this horizontal pipe will get prioritized over this vertical one. And this is the pipe that's going to be feeding the water from the water extractors. Because I want the recycled water to be prioritized over any amount that's coming in from water extractors. And that's how I deal with recycling the water. There's lots of ways you can do it, but this one has worked really well for me. Moving on to this blender, we just need to set this to nitric acid. And by default, this is going to output 30 nitric acid. And if we take a look at these refineries, each one needs 15. So I can just leave this at 100% and just connect this pipe. Alright, so that's basically the layout for this section. I'm just going to kind of briefly go over where everything's going to go, and then I'll fast forward to them being in the actual spots. And then it'll be everybody's favorite: belt, pipework, and load balancing. Alright, so this is going to be basically its own room. We're going to have lots of glass, and then everything else, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it, if I'm going to separate it into rooms or kind of have an idea for something else, but let's just go over the spacing. I'm going to give myself 4 foundations because this is going to be somewhat of a walkway probably. And then because I'm overclocking the machines, I'm actually going to have plenty of space. So I think I'm going to put all of the iron here. And then I'll give myself, I think, like 4 foundations. And then I'll do all of the pure quartz right here. And then I'm going to skip 4 foundations again, and then I'm going to do one of the blocks of the pure Caterium. Because I need 40 refineries, and I don't think I'm going to put all 40 in a row. We'll do one group of 20 right here. And then the other group of 20 will be, I think, kind of in the back. And then for the foundries, I don't need to delete any foundations. They're going to go somewhere over here, I think. I'm going to give myself the same, like 4 foundations, but I'm also going to give myself some space right up here in the front. I definitely need to spread out some more electricity so I can use my hover pack more. So with these, I'll probably have 2 rows of, I think I only need 4 blueprints on each side. And then I'll just kind of have them mirrored like this. And that way all of the finished belts will come down here. And then I'll have space right here to do all my load balancing. And then I'm going to use this space right here to do the assemblers with all the quickwire. Since you guys have seen me place a whole bunch of these before, we'll just skip ahead to the more exciting stuff. And just like that, they're all in the right spot. So this will be the final landing strip for all of the quickwire. Should be enough space. That should be able to hold, yep, that's 10 belts right there, so we're good there. I am still missing 1 row of 20 Caterium, but I'll add that later. It'll be the same as doing this one. Let's go ahead and start over here, and then we'll just kind of work our way through the factory. I went ahead and redid the floor like I was talking about, so now it all lines up correctly. I like that much better. And then I deleted the water. I figured it would be much easier to do after I do the load balancing for the limestone. So I'm going to take care of that limestone first, and I'm going to go ahead and work with the default height of the lifts. So this side is going to be the side that does just the 2. Delete those. We can delete the lift because we need to reconnect it. Oh, and actually I wanted this to be on this side. Keep them all the same. And I wanted to turn sideways. Alright, so on this side, we can go ahead and place this right there. Double check. These all need to be marked too, so let me go ahead and change those now. One of these is 75. And the last one. Then from here, there should be about the center of the whole thing. We're going to go up 1 level higher. Delete all of these. And I also need a merger right on top of it. Alright, so with this splitter, we're going to go ahead and place a temporary splitter right there. This one needs to be a Mark III. And then for this one, you could do it a couple different ways. But I know if you have a gap of 4 meters, this is going to work out just fine. Get our short lift into there. And I forgot this Mark II belt. That right there. And then the last piece, this lift, goes back into our first merger. And now I just need to plug in the initial 375 into either one of these spots of the merger. And now with the water, I can do basically the same thing, but now I know the spacing. So for these, if I pick this line right here for that middle pipe to go in, it'd be just fine. I drag this out to here. Go 1 meter off. There we go. Make sure that's lined up with that one. It's good. And now we can place the floor hole. And there we go. And yep, that'll miss any lifts. So I'll just do that for all 5 of them. And then each of these will just need 30. So in total, if I combine all 5 of those, I need 150 water. And then I just had to redo the mergers real quick because I accidentally deleted a blueprint. I wish that was the first time that's happened. All right, now on this side, things are pretty easy. We just need a Mark III belt right into there to connect these 2 halves, and then same thing with these 2. So now 5 refineries are connected on each side. And if we take a look, each refinery needs 180 raw quartz. Each group of 5 needs 900. So I'll be able to just plug in a belt of 900 into both of these, and that's all we need to do. And then I've already got it set up so 1 nitric acid leads to 2 refineries. I'll show it off before I start, but I'm going to go ahead and skip this because it's basically the same thing I did up here. So the iron plates are going to get load balanced the same way as those 5 blenders. For the pipes, it's going to be really easy. I'm basically just going to place it right here, here, for all of them. And this is going to be 1 liquid. And then what I do is I place a foundation and I just zoop this all the way across. And then I do the same thing for the second one, which will probably be the gas. And then I just nudge it into place. And then sometimes this is a little bit finicky because that's not really the look I'm going for. So what you may have to do is lock it in place, nudge it so you get the little S shape, place it, and then you can still place this. And then I just delete this pipeline support. And then that's how I'll do the nitrogen gas. Let's go ahead and move on to the refineries. So 16 refineries, about as easy a load balancing as we're going to get. We're just going to combine these 2 and those 2, and then we combine the 2 halves. So I'll probably just fast forward. And that's the iron taken care of. And if we take a look at the water, each machine needs 40. And since I already have them grouped in groups of 4, I'll probably just do pipes of 160. Because if I join up 2 groups, then that's 320. And then I have to do a Mark II. And I'm going to need more than 1 water extractor anyways. So I think that'll just be easier. Just pair up 1 water extractor with 1 group of 4. Moving on to the pure quartz. I can finally explain all those things that I just kept saying. I'll explain that later. So this is what I'm going to do. And this is the easiest way I could think of to do this. I am grabbing a pure node, a normal node, and an impure node. Now, when it comes to this recipe, if we take a look, the default is 67.5. Not necessarily the easiest number and greatest to work with, especially when you're outputting 52.5. At least when load balancing is concerned, and I just don't want to deal with just crazy decimal points. Because if I were to take a full 600 node and divide that by the 67.5, that's not a fun number of machines, but you can always just underclock 9 machines, and that wouldn't be too bad. But the amount you get out is just not an ideal number I want to work with either. So instead of working with 600, I have the normal node underclocked to 540. Well, it's still overclocked, just not completely. And then I get a nice even number of 420. For the impure node, I'm doing 270. And for the pure node, I'm doing 1080. And so by doing that, I get to use nice round even numbers of machines. 1 group of 4 refineries deals with 1 normal node. So instead of deleting 2 refineries, I just took out all of the power shards to these ones, and this is an impure node. So these 4 are at 100%, and then the rest of these, which I think is 12, yeah, 3 groups of this blueprint, these ones are all overclocked to 200%. And all I needed to do was just join these 2 blueprints together, and then we'll plug in that Mark VI belt, and this will all come to life. And then we've got Caterium. Thankfully, this is a super easy one to work with when you have it completely overclocked. 60 and 60, these numbers are great. Since these are in groups of 5, I'm just going to be able to connect 1 pipe here Now I've got 5 refineries together. This needs 300, which is great. I haven't really had any issues with Mark 1 pipes being completely full. 300 seems to be completely reliable. Getting a full 600 on the Mark 2, that can be a little bit tricky. And normally I try to avoid that. And I say normally because sometimes I'm an idiot. And in this factory I tried it. Oh boy, we'll get to that later. So since these are all 60 belts, real easy, I just need to connect the extra one to make these a full 5. And there's going to be 4 groups of these to make 20. And since I made things nice and easy on myself, working with 20 machines, much easier than dealing with the default 50 I would have to use. Because now I have them load balanced into 4 groups of 5. So load balancing 4 is really easy. Especially because I set up these blueprints to be able to do that. And I know I'm plugging in 1200, so that means each group of 5 is going to deal with a quarter. So these belts will have 300 on them. And we can go ahead and just place this here. I know this is going to need to have 600. We can come to the center. Alright, there's 1/2 done. Needs to be a splitter. There we go. So Mark 4, Mark 4, Mark 5 lift, and Mark 5 belt. And there we go. There's all 20 refineries, all load balanced. I just need 4 pipes of 300 water each. And then I just need to plug in the 1200 line of Caterium ore. And then thankfully for me, this will all easily fit on one Mark 6 belt. Because the ratio is 2 ore to 1 ingot, so the 1200 ore gets turned into 600 ingots. Which means I could really change that all to be Mark 5. That's probably what I'll do. Alright, moving on to the 9600 copper ingots I need to make. It's almost anticlimactic how easy this is. Get these lined up with the rest of them, and I just need to go up to the same height. And then all I need is just 4 Mark 5 belts. So here and here. Then here. And there. And that's it. That's all I need to do to all 4 sets of these, basically. And then I just need 2 Mark 6 belts. One of copper and one of iron ore. And then those will immediately get split in half. So it'll be 600 to this half, 600 to this half. And then if we come around to this side, got my handy little sign. This is where it's going to come out. So, and this is what I'll do for pretty much all of these. So I'll just use my little stubby lifts to bring them back down to the actual floor level. But that'll be a full Mark 6 belt. This will be a full Mark 6 belt. And I'll have 8 of them. That's going to be awesome. And then the last group of machines, the assemblers. So just like the Caterium Ingots, I needed 100 machines if I was going to leave them clocked to 100%. So I threw 3 power shards in each one of these. And so now I only need 40 total. So there's 10 sets of this 4 assembler blueprint, 5 on this side, and then 5 on that side. And so here's what I'm thinking for load balancing. For the Caterium, what I'm going to do is just place a temporary probably set of foundations. This should be the right height. Pull this out. Yep, that's the right height. Alright, and then I'm just going to load balance the 5 sets of machines, right? So I'm going to do a 5-way split here, and then I'll do the same thing on that side, a 5-way split. And then I'll have both of those input lines being joined together with a splitter right here. Because in total, this whole thing only needs 750 Caterium ingots, so all of that fits on one line. So that'll get plugged in here, split in half. We'll do a 5-way split across all these, and then do the 5-way split across all those. And then as far as the copper, that one's a little bit more interesting. Each set of 4 needs 375. So 2 of them would be 750, and that doesn't sound like too bad of a number to work with, because 3 of them would be 1125, and well, it's just not going to be a great number to work with anyways. So we'll do them in sets of 2. So I need to get belts of 750, and I'll be working with belts of 1200. And as luck would have it, that's a familiar number right there. And that's where my handy dandy 3/8 and 5/8 blueprint comes in. And normally I just throw these in a logistics area and I don't really look at them. But since it's going to be up here on the main floor, I think I can make this look a little bit better. And voila, my 3/8 and 5/8 flat. So I think it'll look a little bit nicer without the lifts, and I can keep everything kind of on the same level. So I'm going to need a couple of these though. So if I line those up there, that one there, there, well, that's kind of encroaching on the area I want to leave open. So I think what I'll do is I'll put 3 of them down there, and then I'll create some sort of platform up here. And then I'm going to place 2 more, and I'll make sure that they're nice and lined up and symmetrical and even. But something like that, I think. Definitely need more foundations back there. Alright, so that's the basic idea. So I'll be able to take one of the 1200 lines coming out of here, and then they'll be able to go right into one of these. It'll do its load balancing, and then coming out of the 5/8 line will be 750. And so with that, I'll be able to take it, and this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to have a splitter right here, because thankfully this splitter lines up right with the half foundation. So if I put one here and grab a Mark IV, since this will have 375, and it's going to plug right into there. Alright, so that's going to get plugged into there. And then I'm going to take the other half and I'm just going to run it underneath. And it's just going to go underneath and it's going to plug into this side over here. And so this will be a real easy way to get my 5 belts of 750. And then I just plug it in. 1/2 goes here, 1/2 goes to the other side. So I just need to plug in the belts all along this side. And the load balancing is really pretty simple. The next things I'm going to take care of are another 20 refineries for the Caterium, but I'm going to set it up exactly like I did these 20. And then I'm going to set up a whole bunch of more sinks. So I've got a couple for the quartz right now, and we're testing that throughput. Everything's looking good, and that's mainly because it has its own train. But we'll go over the trains here in a little bit. The way I'm going to start up the factory is a number of priority switches, like I love to do, because there's just so many things that get turned on all at once. So for the quartz, and the one other one is the pure copper node, which I don't think I've showed off. I'll show it off before we get everything started. But if I zoom in, we can see a belt running underneath the train line, and that's that pure copper node. So I just ran it into the train station. But since it's so far away, and I don't really want to give it its own priority power switch, another way I can do it is get that thing turned on and have a sink next to these ones for the quartz, and then just do the same thing with the smart splitter, where the priority is to the sink, and then when those get turned off, the overflow will send it into the factory. I think that'll just be a little bit easier, and I can cut down on one priority power switch that way. But for a lot of the other nodes, I'm just going to have the priority power switch, and we'll just get them all turned on all at once. Thankfully, with so many of them being Mark 6 belts, they show up to the factory pretty quickly. Oh, this is going to be beautiful. I can't wait. I've made some new additions. So I went ahead and added a hypertube, because it would be really nice to be able to get out to the far parts of the factory, like the nitrogen gas. Why I'm ever going to need to go out there, I don't know. But having to just use my jetpack or hoverpack to get out there is kind of lame. I've got tools, we can make this easier. And I'm really excited for 1.1, because what I did is there's basically a junction, well, not quite. This hypertube actually goes and makes a left and goes down to quartz. And then from the quartz spot, there's 2 hypertubes, one to take you out the rest of the way to the nitrogen, and then that same one will bring you back to the main factory. Not really an ideal setup, and so what I'm hoping is I'll be able to delete this and replace it with whatever that new junction is that they showed off in one of their teaser trailers. My theory is it's not going to be like a whole rework of hypertubes, but I think we're going to get more than just a junction. I think we're going to get a slight rework to hypertubes. My hope is that we'll get a junction and maybe at least 1 or 2 more modules or functionality. I'm really hoping for a like dedicated speed boost thing that you can place on Hypertube, so you don't have to use the entrances over and over again. Even if I have to still power them, I don't mind. But if you could just have it be just like one section, like even if it's bigger than this, but it gave you a speed boost, oh, that would just be so nice for being able to use these for travel within, either within factories or even to, you know, close around factories. I really like hypertubes. I just think they could use just a little bit more polish. So I went ahead and added this. I've got 5 water extractors down there. I'm pretty sure you can fit probably closer to 6 or 7 in here, but I didn't really feel like trying to squeeze in that many. But I really just kind of wanted them in a convenient space more than I wanted to squeeze in the most amount, because I'm pretty sure I'll be able to find enough water around here that won't be too much of an issue. And I've got another friend who brings me Quartz Crystal. Just what I wanted. So normally I try to keep it to 1 extractor to 1 pipe, but I did go ahead and join these 2 up. And they are just kind of headed over here. And the reason for that is I just kind of ran out of space on my bus here. And sure, the distance to the factory isn't far. So I totally could have done just a million other things and made this work. But instead I decided to be stubborn and just use a Mark II pipe that surely won't make me regret it later. And I just have the pipes headed right on into the factory. And then I just kind of split things off to where they need to go. I have 3 pipes of nitrogen, but I only need 1 of them today. The rest of them are going to be used later on. And there are the 2 quartz lines. Those just kind of snake around here. And then I needed to do just a little bit of load balancing. I joined the normal with the impure, and so I needed to resplit them up. And thankfully the ratio is nice and simple. Since the normal node has twice as much as the impure node, you just split it into thirds, recombine 2 of them. There's my normal, here's my impure. And then I've just got the pipes snaking on along here. And then I just used the roof for a lot of my logistics. I knew I was going to need to place a bunch of concrete down, but I wanted to keep it as minimal as possible just because, well, why not? If I don't have a reason to pave over all of this greenery, just won't. We'll just put most of it above it, you know? So here's the nitrogen. That's going over to make the nitric acid. And this little guy is probably going to get moved. I'm probably going to move him somewhere over here, actually, because this is going to be a more convenient place to do the load balancing for the actual iron. So I'm making over 2,000 iron, but what I need today, sorry tree, you're in the way of progress. Out of that 2,080, today I need 75 iron. And all 75 is going to go to 1 lone constructor, because I can completely overclock it, take the 75 iron ingots, and turn it into the 50 iron plates that I need for the nitric acid. I really couldn't figure out a way to put 1 lone machine up there and it not look just so out of place out of rows of, 16 and 20 refineries. 1 lone constructor was just going to be so lonely. So it gets to be super lonely and stuck in the basement. But I'm probably going to move it, and it'll probably go right over here because I'll need to do some of the load balancing to get down to 75. But other than that, it's a whole bunch of just taking belts from one section to another, and it's mainly just ore getting from the different buses that I have into the different places. I'll probably show a little bit more of that off on the final tour, but I should show off the other bus that I've created. So I totally forgot about this one. I don't know how. This well is the closest one, and it's the thing I'm using the least amount of water from. I completely forgot about it until I realized I was short like 20 water. And yeah, should have been using this one. But instead, I have a whole bunch of pipes coming from this other bus. And let's go ahead and just turn this into an entrance and take it to the other side. Nice little short trip. But there's another well down here. And the whole reason I'm grabbing this well is because there's a couple copper nodes right down there, and I needed those. And so that's how this all started. I was grabbing these nodes, which I'm pretty sure that it's 3 normal nodes. Yeah, 3 normal nodes. So I have 1 full Mark 6 belt and then a Mark 5 belt. and I was starting the bus, and when I got to this point I realized, well, it was basically just going to run into this resource well anyways, so might as well use it. So I grabbed up a couple pipes of this and gave myself some labels, which is always kind of nice. So that means the bottom row is 600, 450, 600, so that's these pipes, and then 600 and 1200 are the belts. And I even gave myself a ramp. Look at that. For the distance short, so just a nice short little bus. And now I have more water available when I need it. And to put off doing more belt work, let's take a look at the trains. I decided to get my aluminum and petroleum coke train running. And let's take a look. Alright, $4.99. That's, yeah, these need to be 500, so that's about right. 516 is a little low. These need to be 600, I think. So, gonna have to take a look at that. These only need to be 300 because I had plenty of space. I definitely could have used less freight platforms, but it's kind of nice just to be safer than sorry. Alright, so the trains are looking good, except for aluminum. Aluminum, I think there's something wrong. Alright, so let's just do a quick math lesson. So as we can see, the belts pause whenever there's the docking animation. The pause is about 28 seconds. I'm going to round up. It's like 27.08 or something like that. But just to be safe, we'll just round up to 28 seconds. So 28 seconds out of, 60, 0.4666, right? That's how long it's paused. Which means if I'm going to be transporting 600 aluminum ingots, that means that my buffer down below will be holding about 280 ingots by the time the docking animation is done. And that's why you need a faster belt than what you're carrying. If you want a throughput of 480, you have to use a faster belt, or you have to use 2 belts. You need to use both of the inputs. So 280, and if I'm using a Mark 6 belt, that'll make up for it in like 30 seconds. About the same. Okay. So that's probably not the issue. Because what you could be running into is, say you were trying to move 700 and you only had Mark 5 belts. That means the difference is only 80. And so your round trip of the train would need to be like at least, 4 minutes or whatever, so that it could make up for all of that extra that you stored up while it was docking. I hope that made sense. So that's not really the issue. If it was, what I could do is if I go into the train timetable, you can go to edit timetable. I can pick a station. So this is the Grassy Field, this is the Red Forest. So if I pick this one and I pick the cogwheel, we've got a couple options. This I haven't tried since 1.0, but I don't feel like this worked quite right in pre 1.0. Maybe one day I'll give it a try again. But really what's important is you can change this from or to and. And what I could do is change this to whatever amount I want. So I could actually extend the round trip because its round trip is so short. I could add an extra minute to it, and that would give that belt extra time. So, and if we change this, I think it'll register in time. The round trip is short enough. Adding a minute is totally fine for this. Maybe I didn't save it in time. But what I wanted to show is the belts will start moving even though the train will just sit here for an extra 60 seconds. Even though you add that extra minute, it doesn't mess with the belts anymore. Ah, I see the issue now. It's this right here. I thought I would be sleek and space efficient and just use one storage container, because on the loading side, you really don't need a bigger one if everything is running the way it should. Now this is the petroleum coke, but I'll probably change it for the petroleum coke as well. But with the aluminum ingots, I'm trying to do 600. So if I can only transfer 1200 on here, that means that I'm not doing exactly what I just said. And I need to use a faster speed, but there isn't one. So what I need to do is have this split before the storage containers, and then have Mark 6 belts go straight into each of those. The great thing about this is the way I set it up is I can just delete this. I can just trace this belt all the way back here. And I've got the smart splitter set up, and so it's just automatically going right into the emergency sink here. And that gives me a lot of flexibility with being able to completely screw up my trains and be able to delete them and be able to just delete this whole thing and start over. All right, so let me rework this and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, there's the example I was looking for. As soon as the docking animation is over, belts just resume. Now, the one thing I really dislike about this, oh, and of course, the minute's over and the train's going, but you can't actually access the freight platform while the train is just waiting there. I completely understand during the docking animation, but when it's just sitting there and the belts are still active, but for whatever reason, you can't access the freight platforms. I hope one day that's changed, because if you ever have a train sit there for like 5 minutes, it's really annoying that you can't access the trains. All right, so this is the new and improved system here. So it gets split beforehand, and then each freight platform will get its own buffer. Because I was only transferring 1,000, so 500 for each freight platform with the petroleum coke, this one was actually fine. It could make up the difference. But because I was doing 600 on each of these, and I only have 1,200 belts, I need to split these ahead of time, or else it just doesn't work. And so now we should be up to that throughput in no time. I don't need the petroleum coke or the aluminum for quite a while, so all of this was really just a detour to avoid more belting for a little while. And I was going to need to fix it at some point or another. So when I noticed that the throughput just wasn't there, it was a minor mystery, but one that I just needed to solve. Now I'm going to head back to the factory and finish the belt work. It's pretty much just getting from point A to point B, and getting all the belts and pipes to where they're supposed to go and make it not look too bad. I'm going to do a little bit of decorating, but because I'm going to add a second floor and, well, this project has taken a while and it's probably already going to be a bit late, I'm not going to do quite as much decorating as I would liked. We'll probably save that for the next episode. Let me get back to work and then we'll take a little tour. It's beautiful, isn't it? So many sinks. Ah, so much good stuff. Okay, so we'll get those things eventually. Let's start the tour over here. I told myself I wasn't going to make this factory black and white. And so here's my thinking. I really like the green that's in Swatch 7, and I like purple. It's a good color. And so somebody smarter than me at Coffee Stain decided these two things match. So I figured I would just use these two colors as main ones. And since this brown was also paired up with like a lighter green, I figured I would make this like the third color. And so that's basically what I use because, well, I'm horrible with picking colors. And I figured just purple and green was just going to be just a bit much, a little too out there for me. And so I'd rather use both of those more as accents, and brown is a decent base color. And here's the front of it. So like I said, I wanted to do lots of glass and kind of have this be its standalone part. The rest of the factory is going to be the part that goes up. The sinks are just there temporarily, so that whole section will get deleted once I don't need them anymore. But to make sure everything can get up and running, sinks are really handy. Alright, let's take a look. So this is going to be basically just kind of like a secondary entrance. I imagine eventually I'm going to have hyper tubes coming from the train station. Alright, so as a walkway, I just have some glass foundations that run around the very edge right here. And then this is where all the final products are going to go. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do railing like I normally do or how exactly I'm going to do it. Like I mentioned, I cut off the decorating pretty early. I just wanted to get this front part done. I decided to just kind of do this weird thing. I don't really know what I was doing, but I wanted to leave it open for the smokestacks. But since I was using 2-meter ramps, they're not the same angle as the inverted frame ramps. Those are the same as the 4-meter roofs. And so since these were a steeper angle, that's basically what I came up with. It's okay. It could be better. But I like that I left it open for the smoke to get out. I like that part. So we've just got all of this like we've already gone over. All the finished belts are going along here. So I didn't have to bring this one up and over. I could have just had this one squeeze in right in between here. But the way this is going to work out is it's going to be 3 belts of quartz, 3 belts of silica, and then the iron. And I just like the way that looks better. Oh, with the silica. So the reason I've got 3 belts, and so since I've got 5 blenders, the load balancing for this was really pretty easy. Each machine is outputting 405 silica. So I'm making 2025. So if I split this evenly on 2 belts, having 0.5 on a belt isn't what I want to deal with in the future. Just not going to be fun. But if I put it on 3 belts, that's 675. And so this was my basic load balancing that I did. I basically just needed 3 belts that were 5/3. That makes sense. So I've got the belt of 405 going into here, and then this one is getting split 3 ways. So 2 of them come over here and join up with this blender. So that's basically 5/3, right? And then this one's got 1/3. And then I'm doing the exact same thing on this side. So this one is getting 2 of them, and then the lone one is coming over here. So 3 belts of 5/3. Didn't think I was going to use it again, and then I immediately use it again. So the pure iron ingot load balancer comes in handy. Really couldn't think of a better way to deal with this amount coming out of the refineries than to do it like this. So now I've got a 1200 belt, and that just stays up here and heads along down into the sinks. The 880 belt, however, just comes right down below. Because, like I mentioned, I needed 75. So much easier to leave the 1200 belt alone and just work with this one. And here's the load balancing I came up with. So the 880 is going into a smart splitter. The priority is to the right, everything else is going center. So we've got a Mark V belt that is then getting limited down to a Mark IV. So I've got 480 going into here. And this is basically just doing the same thing that I'm doing with my train balancers, where I've got a Mark I belt, a Mark II belt, and a Mark IV. Since this will be a full 480 belt, I can count on this being full and this being full. So I'm basically taking 180 out, and that'll leave me with 300 on this one. From 300, the load balancing is nice and easy. Split 300 in half, there's 150, here's 150. Split that in half, 75, and here's the 75 I need going into my constructor. That's making the iron plates, and those are going over to the nitric acid. The remaining 805 is just headed on down over here to where I have a whole bunch of more sinks that are dealing with all of the extra ingots that I'm making. All of these load balancers had an extra 3/8. I needed the 5/8 for the fused quickwire, but the 3/8 was basically just getting split off, and I have all of those coming down here. And 3/5 of 1200 is 450. So I've got a 900, a 900, and then I'm combining the extra 450 from the 5th load balancer, and the extra 450 Caterium ingots that I'm currently making are going into this sink. This one right here has the extra iron ingots, and these are the 3 1200 lines that I just didn't even need to use today. I think those are just running straight down here. So this is what that ended up looking like. It's really pretty impressive that just these few machines, these few foundries are going to create just shy of 10,000 copper ingots. Oh, that's awesome. All right, and then here is the load balancing for the Caterium. So basically the same thing I did over there for the blenders, but because the machines are so short and I didn't stack these up, I kind of wanted to not stack these up super tall. So instead I went out this way. And here's the load balancing for the Caterium. Because I need 750, that's basically one whole set of 20, because that'll produce 600 Caterium ingots. But the remaining 150 is really easy to get, because that's 1/4. So just split 600 in half, and then split that in half. And then the rest of it is the 450 that I'm sinking down below with that copper. Alright, so the part that I didn't talk about right here in this section is this guy right here. So this was the 600 pipe that I decided to use. We come up here. For the pure quartz, each one of these blueprints needs 300 water. And so what I really should have done is just use 300 pipes from right over there, but I had kind of already forgotten about them. And I wanted to use that full Mark II pipe. I just wanted to make it work. And boy, oh boy, did this take a while to figure out. So even with the pipe completely full, and it's not splitting that many times, there's only 8 machines connected to it. there still ended up being sloshing. There was just gaps of air somehow in here. Doesn't really make any sense. But the sloshing basically happened at the farthest right here. Past there, every pipe was completely full and had a throughput of 600. But once you got to here, that's where the sloshing started to happen. And before you comment, I know this is just like the worst way to feed your machines is have the pipes go underneath like this. I am well aware. But sometimes you just want it to be a certain look, and this was the one I was going for. So to fix the sloshing, I added a pump here. And that worked for a little bit longer. And that fixed the sloshing along this pipe right here. But then there would be sloshing after the junction. So what I did was add 2 more pumps. And I've got one here and one on that side. Thankfully, I'm going to be able to let this run for many hours before I actually need this quartz. So if there are issues, thankfully, I know I have a pretty easy workaround. I just am lazy and don't want to do it. Because there's extra water right here. So I could very easily just run a 300 pipe over here. And then just delete one of those water extractors and turn that one into a Mark 1 pipe. And then just feed the other one. Because every other system that needs exactly 300 water and I just have 1 water extractor feeding it, just 1 pipe and everything, works like a charm. So all of the finished products are going to end up over here. I think this is like 24 sinks. It's just pretty funny. I could definitely load balance these and get them onto a fewer belts. Since these will only have 900 on there. The load balancing would be pretty easy to load balance them into Mark 6 belts. The reason I'm not going to do it is because for the next floor, 900 is just a perfect number to work with. I think I have Quickwire going to either 4 or 5 different processes, and all but one of them are in a multiple of 900. So it's just going to be easier leaving it like this. And hidden under here on the train station, I've got all of these ones working away to make sure the throughput was good for all my trains. So we see gaps on here because this is only 1,000, so that's right. The rest of them I think should be full, or at least these ones. So aluminum is looking good now. So for the quartz, this is how I have it set up. It's going into a smart splitter, and these are set up so the priority is to the left. Obviously for this next one, the priority is to the right, and then overflow straight ahead. These are set up so that the aluminum and the petroleum coke, so the 3 black ones, are on the main power grid, and then the rest of them, the quartz and the copper, are connected to this priority power switch. So when I flip the switch and turn those off, it'll send the quartz and the copper, but the other ones can stay sinking. Totally didn't figure that one out the hard way. I really like the Mark 6 lifts. And so those will just head on over here. And then basically at the base of most of the buses where I connect the power going out to all of those miners, there's a priority power switch for those. So we can come over to this guy over here. We can flip the switch and watch it all come to life. And for as far as some of these things are coming, like that quartz is coming in good ways. This whole thing is going to come to life pretty quickly. I think the longest time is going to be getting the iron plates made and go through its load balancing because I just love to use Mark 1 belts. But everything but that quartz and silica will come to life real fast. I just need to flip this one off and all of these ones on. Yes, there's still a couple. I did delete the bauxite ones in the red forest. I was proud of myself. This factory is a great example of how fast Mark 6 belts are and how quick load balancing can work. Let's start that timer. And I think that's it for the Quickwire. Pretty quick. That's 9,000 Quickwire. All being sunk. Nice full belts of copper. Love to see it. Terrific. Looks like both the quartz and the silica are staying on. I love the description. It's water. The main concern with this kind of a setup is that this needs to empty right away. You don't ever want to see it start to back up. As soon as it starts to back up, then the whole thing's going to shut down. And yeah, it's just emptying right away. And the beauty of this system, if we look, it's emptying into this pipe right here. This pipe is completely full. This pipe, completely full. But every time this gets water, it empties right away every single time. Now, as far as my stuttering belts here, what I like to do is I just clear out the extra. So I just grab the whole stack of limestone. It's going to pause the production for just a few seconds while it grabs another 5. And in that time, it builds up just a tiny bit more of a buffer of the dissolved silica, which is never really a bad thing. And now that'll clear out all of that backed up part on the belt, and it'll get things flowing a little bit smoother. Chances are I'll have to do the same thing with the copper ingots on the assemblers, because the copper moves just so much faster than the Caterium. A bunch of those assemblers probably have completely full inventories. So by taking that out, it'll get rid of all of that stuttering of the belts. The iron is working away like a charm, but I kind of already knew that it would. I've done this setup a few times, so wasn't too worried about this one. And these machines are staying completely full of water. Obviously, it can take a long time for random issues to show up, so definitely gonna let this thing run for quite a while. So what I may do is use my priority switches to basically shut off this floor. And it'll just leave just random bits of ore in a bunch of the machines, and hey, they'll just start up just a tiny bit faster next time. But this way I can make sure everything on this floor runs at 100%, and then I'll create a second floor, and then when I'm ready to create an elevator to take most of these up to the second floor, I'll probably just shut off this whole floor, and that way I don't have to worry about all of these full belts running. Or creating a whole bunch of more priority power switches to turn off all these sinks. I'd rather kind of not. So we'll just make sure everything runs here perfect, and then we'll shut it off, and then we'll restart it to get the next floor going. It sounds like a good plan. Hopefully it won't bite me. As much as I would like to be adding the next floor in the next video, unfortunately there's actually still a little bit more prep work to do for that floor. I may or may not have miscalculated one of my inputs and just completely forgot about one of them. So that's what I'm going to be taking care of in the next video, and 1 or 2 side projects. So I may or may not have used almost all of my power shards. I think it's totally worth it. I cut down on the amount of machines by a lot. But take a look at the power. It looks like, are we hitting 100,000? Oh, we're just shy. So I'm basically using half of my power grid. That's pretty good. And that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. I love the end game and these large factories. It's my favorite part of the game. The flip side is that the projects are big and long and take me a bit longer to make the videos. But I now have most of the parts I need for this electronics factory. However, I need more coke and plastic than I currently have available. So look forward to that. And thanks for watching.